In this video, you will learn how to build a fully dynamic blog with Angular and Contentful. This will be a fully responsive web application built with Angular, and our Angular website will talk to the Contentful service to get data for our blog. If you don't know what Contentful is or how to use it, don't worry. I will go step by step and explain everything you need to set up Contentful. Contentful is a headless CMS and is a content management platform to create, manage, and publish content on any digital channel. So in simpler terms, we will not be creating any backend service to save content for our application in databases. Instead, we will use Contentful, which will do the job for us. This will save us a lot of effort and we don't have to manage any backend APIs. If you like this video, please hit the like button to see the channel grow. Please consider subscribing as well. With that said, let's start building our application. We will first set up Contentful. So let's go to contentful.com and sign up and log into Contentful. After that, I will skip the personalizations and understand how Contentful works. The data in Contentful is divided into this hierarchy. A Contentful app has organizations, and organization has spaces. Each space has content models, which are like structures, and each content model will hold different content types, and each content type will have content, which is our data. If you consider our blog application, content type is the structure of a single blog post, and it will have various fields like title, content, summary, etc. We are only concerned about adding content type and content for our blog application. So we will come back to Contentful and create a content type and some content. I will click on design your content model. It's asking us to create our first content type. I will click on create a content type. To create a content type, I will need a name and maybe a description for it. The content type for our blog application will be a blog post. So we want to create a structure for a blog post. So I will name it blog post, and then you can give a description as well. And after that, hit create. After that, it is asking us to add a field to our content type. So I will click on add a field. I will create my first field, and that will be the title of the blog post. So I will create a text field and I will name this a title. And this will be a short text. So that'll not exceed my 256 characters, and that's fine. And I will click on create. And from here, I can see that this is the first field of our content type blog post. And from this button over here, you can add more fields. So I'll click on this button and add the next field, which will be the URL handle, and that will be text again. And the same short text, and then I will click create. The next field we want is the featured image of the blog post. So I'll click add, and this type I'll choose media, and this will be the featured image, and this will only have one file. Click on create. After that, I will add the summary, which will be like a short description of what the blog post is. So that will be a text again, because that will not have any images, and you can keep it as a short text, but I'll keep it as a long text. So that will be summary. Click create. After that, we will add the field for the content, which will be of rich text. So that will have some text in it and some images as well. So that will be our blog post content. So I'll click on that, and then I will call it content. Click create. The next one would be the author. So I will have the name of the author who's writing the blog post, and that will be a short text. So author. The next one will be updated date. So that will be a date and time, and I will call this updated date. Click create. And finally, we will have a visible field, which will be a Boolean, so yes or a no, which will say, is the blog post in a draft mode or is it published? So I will choose this field and then name this visible. Click on create. After adding all the fields, I will click on save. It's now time to add some content to this content type. So we will create our first blog post, because now we have created the structure. So I will come to content, and inside here I will click on this add blog post, And this is basically an editor where I can actually create blog posts for my blog. So now that you have created the structure inside the content type, it's now time to create some actual content. So I will quickly go ahead and fill all these fields. Once you have finished adding everything to the blog post, you can click on publish. I can now come back to content and create more content if I want. I will go ahead and add some more blog posts. It is now time to create our Angular application, and after creating our Angular application, we will link our application to the Contentful service and get data from here. So I have created a folder for myself, which is blog with Angular and Contentful, and in here I will open my terminal window or command prompt, and in here I will write the command to create a new Angular application, ng new Angular blog app, and hit enter. I will select routing, so I'll say yes and press enter, and I will also select CSS. The Angular application has been created, so what I'll do is I will browse inside the folder, and over here I will open this folder in Visual Studio Code. I will first start my project inside a browser, so I will go to terminal and open a new terminal, and over here I will write ng serve -o. As you can see, our Angular website is running and we get the static Angular website that the Angular CLI gives us out of the box. Let's go back and clean this. So I'll come back to my Visual Studio Code application, and inside the source folder, I will under app, I will go to the app.component.html, and here is all the HTML that you can see on the static website. So I will select all of it, but I will leave the last line, which is the router outlet. So I can select all and ignore the last line and save the changes. And when you do that and come back to the browser, you can see the now we will get a blank slate. So now we can start working on our blog application and start with the HTML elements first. I will come back to my editor, and in here I will open another terminal window and I will create a new component. So I will first browse to cd source, and then inside source I go to the app folder, and in here I write the command ngc to create a new component, and the name would be home. So I'll create a new home component. Inside the home component, I will open the HTML file first and first see if this is working or not. So I will first create a route for this home component by going to app.component.appRoutingModule, and in here in the route I will add a new route. So I will give it a path which will be an empty string, and then the component which will be home component, and save that. And if I refresh my application now, you can see that the home component works. So we will treat the home component as the home page, and we will show the header of our application, of our blog application. And after the header, we will show the blog posts. So we will loop through all the blog posts that we have in Contentful and show them over here. So I will do some work inside the home component now. I can close this and I can remove that, and I will minimize this as well. In here, I will first start with some HTML structure. So I will first create a header tag, and inside the header tag, I will have a div which will contain 3 span elements, and that will be my logo. So I have something special in mind. I will call this the, and the text for the second span would be dev, and the third one will say blog. And I will give classes to each one of them as well. So a class of, let's say, logo hyphen something. So logo 1, logo 2, and logo 3. After that, we have the structure ready, and we can see that inside here as well. But let's give some styles to this. So I will come to the style.css, and in here, I will first start with the elements. I will remove margin and padding. So margin of 0 and padding of 0. And I will have the box sizing of border box, and then font family of Vardhana. And I will also give a color of a dark color. So let's say 353535. And if I save that, nothing changes, but yeah, we can see the font change. After that, we style the header. We give it a width of 100% and then a height of 100 VH, which occupies the full screen of the full screen, which is 100 VH view height. And then I will display this as a flex so that I can bring the contents of this in the center over here. So display this as a flex and then justify content of center and then align items of center. Save that and you can see the dev blog coming over here now. And after that, we will target the div inside it. So header div, we will display this as a flex as well, and then display the flex direction as column. And after that, we will work on the spans. So header div span, and then to the span we will display this as a block and text align as center. So save that. You can see they'll be stacked one on top of each other. Now it's time to modify a few things. So let's work on the second span, which is logo -2, and then we will give it a big font size. Let's say font size of 50 pixels and a bold weight. So font weight of bold. After that, we will work on logo 3 and we will give a good letter spacing, which should be around 20 pixels. And if I save that, you can see what we are trying to achieve. We are trying to achieve that, it takes the entire space of the dev word and then they all to be left aligned. So text align of center for all the spans and for the div as well. Justify content of flex start, and then maybe give it some margin left of a -5 pixel and align items to flex start. And that works. So you can see this will be our logo, and this will be a full page logo, and when somebody scrolls, they'll be able to see the blog posts down below. So it's now time to work on the blog post, and for that we need to talk to Contentful. So what we'll do is we'll first install Contentful, and here's the package library that we want to install, which is Contentful. And we also have this developer's guide if you want to go ahead and look at it as well. So we can use this command to, or not this command actually, but this command npm install. So I'll copy this command and come back to my terminal over here and paste it. So this is installing Contentful for us, and once that is installed, we will create a new service in which we will try to call Contentful. So Contentful has been installed. Let's create a service as well, and for that I'll create a folder inside the app folder called services. So I will browse to the app folder, so the services folder first. So cd services, and in here I will create a new service using ngx, and the service would be called, let's say, Contentful. So this has created us a new service inside this folder. So I will open this service as well, and in here I will minimize this. In here we want to basically be able to talk to the Contentful library and our Contentful service as well. So let's do that. On the top over here, I will first import the dependencies from Contentful. So I will say import, and I will import from Contentful, and then I will import create client and then entry. And once I've imported that, I will create a private field over here. So private, let's say client, and that will be equal to create client. So I will say create client, and create client needs a JavaScript object which has two things we want to give it. One is the space ID, which is this one, so that'll be a string, and then one will be the access token, that'll be a string as well. So where do we get these space ID and access token from? We have to go back to Contentful. So I'll go back to the Contentful website and I'll go to settings, and I will come to API keys, and I will click on add API key. So this will create an API key for us. You can change the name if you want to, but these are the two fields that we are interested in. One is the space ID, so we will copy that and paste it over here, or you can go to the environment file and paste this inside the environment.ts. So I'll create a new variable called space ID, paste this here, and the other one would be access token, and that'll be this content delivery API. Don't use the content preview API because that has write permissions as well. So use this key. So I'm going to use it now and paste it inside the environment file. Once you have pasted the access token and space ID in the environment file, we can directly use it inside our service. So I will say environment dot space ID, and I will say environment dot access token. So using that, I have created my client, and now I can use it inside a method. So I will create a method called get all entries, and in here I will use the client. So this dot client, and I will call the method get entries. This basically returns me all the entries or all the contents for my application for the space ID. So I have content, as in I have blog posts, so it will return me all the blog posts, and this is a promise, so I can use a then and then show you by consoling it to the application. So I can say entries such that console.log entries. So if I save it, I can now call this from my home component. So I will go to home.component.ts, and I will first inject this service. So I will say private contentful service is of type contentful service, and now using the service on the ng on init method. So I will say this dot contentful service dot get all entries, save that, and save this application as well. If I go back and refresh this and open DevTools, you can see that we got the 5 objects over here, 5 items. This is what we are interested in. So we have data coming back from the Contentful API, Contentful service. So it's now time to consume it. And you can look at the structure of how the data is coming like by going to your content model and the content type. And you can use the JSON preview to see what kind of a data is returned back. See, these are all the items coming back. So we will use that. We will first display all this data in our HTML. So I will come back to the application, and I will first change this method to not console it, but to actually return an observable. So instead of that, I will hold this value of the promise inside a variable, and after that I will return an observable, and I can convert an observable from a promise by using the from keyword. So from promise, and this returns me an observable now. So coming back to my home component, I can store the observable coming from here to an observable field, which will be a public field. So I will call this blog posts, and that will be of type observable any or undefined. and then using this value, I will assign this observable from the value that is coming back from our service. So our observable is now holding this value. It's now time to display it in the UI. So I will open the home component.html, and below the header, I will use a main tag. And after that, I want to preview it first as a JSON value. So I will use the curly braces, this, and I will use the JSON pipe to display the values as JSON format. If I refresh this, and if I scroll down, there's nothing coming because I don't have an if statement over here. I'm not reading the observable, so that's wrong. So I have to use it like this, ngIf, and I want to read the observable first. So observable using async pipe, that creates a subscription, and I can store it in a template variable as blog posts. And now I can use this blog post and use the JSON pipe to display this on the screen. Sorry, I think it's ngIf, and save that again. And now I can see the JSON coming back. It's very difficult to read. So a tip here is wrap your JSON inside a pre-tag. So if I move this JSON inside my pre-tag and save it, I'm now able to read the JSON as well. So all I'm interested here is inside the JSON, I want to go to my items, which is 5. It's an array. Inside the item, which is this object, I want to look at the fields of the item, which is this one. And fields have this title, URL handle, featured image, and stuff like that. So let's try to display that. You can keep this for your purpose for the time being. I will start with the image tag. So the image will have a source. And before even we use the image tag, we want to iterate on these blog posts. So I will first create a div. Let's say give it a class as well. And the class will be blog posts container. And then here I will create a loop. So ng, not if, ng for let blog post of blog posts. And I can say blog post dot items because I know these are the items. This is the actual array that I'm interested in. So I'm using that, and I can minimize that for now. So I'm using that. Now I have the individual blog post. I will first want to display the image and see if that is working. So the source of the image is hold inside blog post dot fields dot featured image dot fields dot file dot URL. And I know this because I have seen the JSON structure, and I know it must be coming in from here. So let's just see, save that. I should get 5 images, and let's see if I have those 5 images, and here they are. So I can see 5 images from my 5 blog posts. So this is working. So after the image, I want to display the title. So that will be an h2 tag, and I will use curly braces. Using the same technique, I will go to the fields, and then I will have the title property populated. I can maybe comment this out for the time being. And after the title, I want to display the author. So let's say a paragraph with the class of author. Using curly braces, I will use blog post dot fields dot author because these are text fields. It's not a complex object like this one. And after that, we will have a similar one for showing the summary. And here I can change it to summary. And finally, we will have an anchor tag which will say read more. That will be like a button to click, and the users can dive deep into seeing the contents of it. So this is displaying nicely. We can see the title, we can see images, author, the summary of the blog post, and a button. It's not looking pretty, but let's work on that now. So using this class, I can style it. So I'll go back to my styles.css, and let's say a max width of 600 pixels and a margin of 0 auto, so that everything is in the center. Save that. After that, I will work on the image. So this image, the width is 100%. Save that as well. And you can see it's coming right in the center. Looks good already. After that, we will give a margin bottom of 20 pixels for the image. And similarly, we'll create tags for the title, which is the H2. After that is the author. After that is the summary. So we don't want width over here, but I want a margin bottom below everything. Save that. This should give some nice margins below everything, which it does. So now I want to separate blogs from each other. So coming back to this container, I will have a margin bottom of around 100, maybe 150 pixels, let's say. Save that and refresh. You can see there's a good margin between blogs, which is looking nice. And let's say give it a padding of 20 pixels all around, and give a background color of a light color. So F1, F1, and F1. That is looking nice, and you can add any transitions you want to. Final thing is the button. So again, blog post container, anchor element. We will remove the underline, so text decoration of none, and then background color of a dark color of white, and then padding of let's say 10 pixels from left and right, and then 20 pixels, 10 pixels from top and bottom, and 20 pixels left and right. Save that. That is looking good. Maybe a border radius of 2 pixels, and display this as an inline block. That's looking great. And I think we are done over here. So we have a head section, which is looking fancy. And after that, maybe we can have a background color for that, so that it has a good separation. So the header section will have a background color of a very light color. Save that, and maybe a margin of that as well. So margin bottom of 150 pixels. And as you can see, we have the header over here, and then the blogs start after that. So it's looking nice. It's now time to work on the second part of this, which is when we click on this button, it goes to the next component. Currently it does nothing, but when we click on it, it goes to inside the blog, where we can read the contents of the blog. So for that, we will come back to our application. I will expand this again, and we will create a new component for that, and I will call it let's say the blog component. So ngg, so I'll come out first. So cd ... inside app, I will say ngc, and I will call this the blog post. So the blog post component. And when that is getting created, we want to add routing to that. And for routing, I will come back to the app routing module, and I will create another route with a path that will say, if I go to blog slash let's say the ID of the blog post. So I will take an ID from the path, which is a parameter, and the component to be loaded is the blog post component. So save that. I can close this now. And now we need to correct our anchor tags, which is this one. So I will come back to my home component HTML, and instead of this href, I will use router link, and the first, it's an array inside. the first entry would say blog because it has to go to blog, and then slash, the second one would be the URL, or not the URL but the ID. So I will say blog posts dot sys.id, and let's see if that works. I'll save that and refresh the application. If I hover over it, you can see on the left hand corner over here, it's showing localhost 4200/blog/some ID. That's the ID of this blog post, from which this Contentful service recognizes this as a unique blog post. So if I go to this blog, and every blog has an ID, entry ID, so that's what we are displaying over there, and that's how we will search in our application. Let's see if it works. If I click on this button, we can see that the blog post component has loaded. So our component is getting loaded. We just now want to read this ID and then try to fetch it. So I will close my app component here, the home component, and I will open the blog post component now. I will minimize this. So now we are inside the blog post component, which is empty at the moment, and we have an ID coming in. So we will read the ID from the route, and for that we need the activated route. So we will inject something, private route of type activated route, and using this route in the ng on init, this route.params, we will subscribe to this params, and then inside here we will say params such that, and we will get the ID from the param. So I will have a constant of ID which is equal to params in bracket ID, which is the same name as I had given in the app routing module. So now that we have the ID, I can go to the Contentful service to fetch a single ID, but we don't have a function for that. So let's create one. So get entry by ID. It will take an ID which is of type string, and similar to what we did before, I will create a promise, and instead of get entries, I will get entry, which is a single one. It takes an ID which we will pass it because we have it already. And after that, similar to before, instead of a promise, we will return an observable. So now we have a new method inside the service. It's now time to use it. So we will inject the service first. Is of type Contentful service. Now it's time to use the service. This dot Contentful service dot get entry by ID, and pass the ID that we got from the param. Now that we have the data over here as an observable, we will create a public observable, which will be a single blog post, is of type observable or undefined. And finally, we will have this observable and assign the value coming from the service. So we have something in this observable over here. It's now time to use it. So I will come back to the blog post component.html, which is this one, and I will remove this paragraph. First of all, I will use the same technique with a pre tag. I will display this as a JSON, and I will use a main tag first. Ngif, and use the observable, use an async pipe to read the observable, and store it in a template variable. And using this blog post, I can now read it. I just have to take this pre inside. So blog post, and use a JSON pipe to output it. If I refresh it, you can see on the page load, we are getting the data for this ID for this blog post. So we can see everything. And now it's time to also create the HTML elements for this screen. So I will come back and I will comment this out. The first thing I'll do is I'll create a container again. So div post container, and inside that I will first have an image again, and I'll copy some of the stuff from the home component so that it makes my life a little easier. I'll go to the HTML and copy image, title, author, and let's say summary as well. So I will paste this here because it's the same data and the same structure of the data because it's a single blog post. I will save that. We have a different class over here, so, and I don't know how to spell it, container. So save that, and this will be content. I will now start to style this container first, and I will go back to the styles.css, and using the post container, I will first define the max width, let's say 600 pixels again. And what else did we had over there? Margin auto. We will copy some stuff from it, and then let's see how this looks like at the moment. Now we have to work on the image, so I'll copy some of the styles from above as well. Image h2 at least, and we just have to change the name of the parent class. Save that, and it should be limiting the image to maximum of something. For this post container, I will have this a margin top of, let's say, 150 pixels, and we already have a margin bottom, and maybe a good amount of border radius, let's say 20 pixels, and overflow of hidden. Save that. We have a nice rounded effect over here. We can actually get rid of the padding for now. Let's see how it works out later on. We just have to give paddings below, but now you can see we have a nice rounded text of the image. So I will add the padding over here. So a padding of 20 pixels from 0 20 pixels, so 0 from the top and bottom and 20 pixels from left and right. And similar to that, I will have this for the paragraphs as well, which is the author and the summary or the content. So for the author, which is dot author for both screens, I will have a color of let's say light color, AAA, and that's looking good. Now it's time to see how we show the content, because if you remember in here, when you do add a blog, this is Markdown. So it's a Markdown language, and it's not HTML, and it's a string, but it's in Markdown format. So we have to find a way to render this Markdown into an HTML. So for Angular, we use a library called Ngx Markdown. So this is the link to that library. And if I go to the top, they have this is the library Ngx Markdown. So we just first have to install this. So I'll go to the installation and use this command to install. So I'll come back, and in the terminal, I'll paste this and hit enter. And this will basically, do the rendering of the Markdown for us, and we will be able to display HTML inside our application. The second step that we have to do as part of this is to add this location into the scripts inside the angular.json file. So I will copy this path, and once this is installed, which it is, I will go to the browser and I will open the angular.json, and inside the scripts array, I will have a new one, and I will paste that what I copied. So I can now close it. The next step is to configure it. So I will go to the configuration section, and it's asking us to import the Markdown module inside the app.module file. So I will first copy the import statement and come to app.module.ts, paste that over here, and then I will copy this into the imports array, which is down below. So comma imports array. And finally, it's time to use it. So I'll go to the usage of this, and I can use it by the simple tag, and I'll copy this from here, and I will come to the blog component.html, and this content, which is markdown at the moment, I will have another file, another element, just to prove it, and I will use the value inside here like that. So I will show it to you. This comes out as markdown, and this is rendering our markdown into HTML. So I'll save that, and if I come back, so this is markdown. You can see this hash, which is a heading 2, and down below this hash is getting converted into HTML. So all of this is being rendered from markdown to HTML. So now we no longer need this. We just need the class, or let's wrap this markdown inside our paragraph so that we have the styles preserved as well. So save that, and you can see you have the image on the top, you have the title, you have this coming out as well. I think there's 2 paddings being applied somehow. Most likely it is. Let's quickly go to the styles. So we have padding of 20 pixels over here, and then 20 pixels over here. So I will right click to inspect quickly using the inspector. So inside the markdown we have paragraphs as well, so I don't need the content, to be honest. Or instead of that, I can just say .content and not give the paddings to every paragraph inside the HTML as well. So that's better, but now this is gone, so we need to give it to the author as well. And the H2 for this is getting applied to ones below as well. So we can remove the H2 to say title and give this class to the blog component over here. So come back and refresh this one more time. So now everything is working fine. As you can see, this is only being rendered like that because we have created it like that. But if you now go back, and this is your application, the header, this is the blog posts that you have created, or anybody else can create it because it doesn't require any backend language to create stuff inside Contentful. So your admin team or anybody who's not even a programmer can create blog posts now. And if I go inside any one of them, you can read the details as HTML and come back to open another one. And it not only takes text, but it also takes images as well inside context, inside your content. This brings us to the end of this video. We are done creating this application, but the possibilities of using these languages are endless. If you want, you can grow this application to however you want. I hope you really enjoyed creating this blog website using Angular and Contentful. If you did, please show your support by hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel. I hope you have a great day. I will see you all in the next video.